Hello everybody, today I'm just going to be talking about my thoughts on Diablo 4. I just hit 100, so I figured I'd go ahead and talk about my experience with the game. So first off, when it comes to the campaign and cutscenes, pretty good. It was pretty metal to just kind of see, somebody get their head bashed in within, like the first few minutes of the game, so that was kind of cool. I mean, the boss fights were pretty sweet. I actually really like the story. Heck, I even like some of the side quests. I thought it was really funny in Act 4 when everybody's kind of just getting high, walking around the swamp. That was kind of an entertaining story. That's for sure. But and then I mean the boss fights were, man, I don't know. I guess at the very end, that kind of gauntlet fight that you do, there were some bosses, because I don't want to spoil it, but there was a couple bosses that I would have liked to fight sooner. And I also don't like that there's a couple of world bosses that I don't believe you end up even fighting in the campaign, so I thought it would have been cooler if they maybe would have adjusted that around to where those would have became kind of like some type of pillar boss fights. But one of them ended up being that kind of, but the other two weren't, which kind of sucked. But other than that, I had a pretty good time with the campaign. I enjoyed it. I will say this: did anybody else notice that, like, I don't know if it was Act 4 or 5, but I didn't realize there were 6 acts. I only thought there was 5. Like, one of those acts just went by so fast, and I didn't even notice I was doing it. And I don't know which one it was. I don't know if it was 5, if it was 4. Like, I was in Hawazar doing stuff, and then all of a sudden I was in Hell on Act 6, and I was like, wait. I was like, hold on, hold the phone, like what the heck is going on here? But hey, that's okay. When it comes to kind of moving on now to the open world and the level scaling, I know level scaling's been kind of a hot topic. I've been hearing a lot of people say things like it steals your power and stuff like that, which to an extent it does. But I think overall the leveling experience more stems around your ability to use the Codex of Power as opposed to anything else, because you do get like free legendary aspects to use, and it seems like the game is balanced around using those. So if you don't end up using them, I think it can give you a pretty rough time. I like the open world though. I thought it was pretty fun. I'm an MMO player, so it doesn't bug me. I know for people that are more solo type players, maybe that's not what they wanted. It's probably not the best for them, but anyways, I thought Helltides were fun. I think the dungeons are fun. There's like 115 of them. Some of them are a little copy-paste depending on where you're at. Like, it does seem that there is kind of like a few styles that kind of repeat themselves. Now, there is a lot of variation to the dungeons, but once you've done 115, you kind of start to see the similarities and like how they were made. So, and some of them are more, I think like each zone maybe has like 4 or 5 different types, and then it seems like that's kind of copy pasted everywhere in that zone. Like they have like their own special like zone themed one kind of thing, and then there's maybe a couple that has a little bit of crossover from previous zones. That being said, there are some really cool ones. Like I really liked Forbidden City and Fractured Peaks. It was really, I don't know, I guess demonic looking, so I thought that was pretty cool. Helltides are pretty fun. I actually kind of like that you have that risk of losing half your cinders if you die, so it makes like early on when you're first getting into them, like, okay, I can't die to the random boss that's sitting around here that's probably 10 levels higher than me. I remember one of my friends, when we first were playing through it, he ended up dying when he just got enough to get like the weaponry. That world boss, like Kixarth or whatever, came up and just one-shot him. Because I think at the time we were like, I think that boss was like 75, and we were like 67 or something like that. So, because it was right after we got World Tier 4 unlocked. It feels bad man moment, but it happens. Still pretty fun though. Pretty fun stuff to do in the open world. Tree of Whispers, I think, is a little lackluster towards the end. It's a good way to get gear for alts though. I did find that out. It is a good way to get gear for alts, but it's a little lackluster. You don't really get legendary catches that often, so it's mainly a good way to fish to get rares for alt characters, I think. I don't really find a particularly good use for it for me, being level 100 at the end game. I think it's there's more, I guess, more efficient, better things you can do. So they could buff that a little bit, maybe make it a little bit more worth it. So when it comes to the classes, I think the class balancing overall is fine. I think Druid and Barbarian had a little bit of a weaker experience. That being said, if you utilize the Codex of Power, I think on Druid it fixed it a lot, but I think on Barb, no matter what you do, your leveling experience is kind of lackluster, unfortunately. So maybe they could fix that a little bit. But overall, I kind of like the way the classes are. You know, Sorcerer seems pretty balanced. I think Barbarian at the end game is probably I don't know if it's the strongest anymore after the nerfs, but you know, maybe it's Rogue. I don't know, I'm not really sure about that. I don't follow the pulse on the end game meta too much, but I do like how, generally speaking, how the classes are balanced. I think Necro could use a little bit of a buff though to the mobility, because I was playing that and it's just so slow. Like all the other classes are just so fast in comparison. Like give it back Blood Rush or whatever that thing was called from Diablo 3. That'd be cool. So, also in the skill, when it comes to like the skill trees, I think the skill trees were pretty straightforward, not really too confusing. You know, I think people knew like kind of what builds they were going to be able to make. I think some classes were a little bit more complex than others. Like I think Druid has a lot more crossover than a lot of other classes with what they do. You know, given like Grizzly Rage, you can pretty much run like Storm and Earth abilities inside of a Werewolf or Bear or Werebear shell, which is pretty cool. And then you have, you know, like Nature's Fury and all that, so it seems like they were kind of geared towards being hybrids, whereas like Necromancer seems a little bit more straightforward, where it's like if you want to play Bone, you're going to play Bone. If you want to play Blood, you're going to play Blood. You're not really going to mix and match a whole lot when it comes to that. So, I don't know, maybe that's a problem for Necro. Maybe they should fix it up, give it a little bit more build variety, but I also think maybe they should leave it the same and make sure there's a simple class for newer, inexperienced players to play. It just sucks for the people, for the advanced Necro players that are playing it, I guess. So after that, moving on to the Paragon. Paragon's really not all that confusing. I think it's a lot more. An optical illusion on how confusing it is, because really it's just, okay, look at the glyph slot. Does it give, and then put the glyph in that glyph slot that has, you know, that can maximally take advantage of whatever the stat is that it has around it the most. Like, you know, for example, some slots have like 50 decks around them, some of them only have 35 or 39 decks around them, so it's like, well, take your biggest one that scales off of decks and put it in the one that has 50, right? Not really too confusing. And then after that, it's, well, do you want the legendary node? Okay, if not, just find the quickest way off to the next board so you can get your next glyph socket and you can work your way to the next legendary node, and then just take all the rare nodes that are like along your path to doing that, and congratulations, you have a Paragon board. I will say one thing that's tricky is meeting the requirements, because you do have to roll stats onto your gear. Like if I was to roll this willpower off of my weapon right now, I would lose a bunch of rare node stats. Well, not a bunch of them, but like I think like 1 or 2, maybe 3, because it costs like 610 and I only have like 700 willpower. So I have to think about that on my gear. I think it also is why it kind of makes putting like a main stat on at least one main stat on a lot of your gear kind of meta, just to make sure you can meet those requirements. But at the same time, if you don't, like, because those bonuses are typically additive, it doesn't matter as much as people would think. But you know, ideally in a perfect world you would want to get those bonuses though. So when it comes to legendaries, I think that there's, for some classes, they're kind of lacking on legendaries. You know, I think like for Druid, just as an example, like Grizzly Rage has like really good legendaries that incentivize people to use it, but it's like, where's the Cataclysm legendaries? Where are the Lacerate legendaries, right? And I think that's a big part of the reason why people are using Grizzly Rage, on top of the fact it has a multiplier like that. But it's also like, well, if you just kind of look at the landscape of like, okay, well, what legendaries are out there? It's like, what legendary really buffs Cataclysm? What buffs Lacerate? Petrify is a buff in itself, so I guess I don't know if that one's really relevant to talk about. But you know, Grizzly Rage is the one that actually has like a legendary for it, and the legendary is amazing. It increases your critical strike chance every time you crit by 10%. That's wild. So they definitely need to maybe work on some legendary balancing, but the legendaries are pretty fun, at least for Druid. They are. I can't necessarily speak for other classes, but based on what I've seen, I'd say the other classes have some pretty fun ones. Seems like maybe Sorcerer could use some legendaries for Meteor that are a little bit better, but aside from that, you know, pretty cool. I know Necro had some cool legendaries. It seemed like Bloodlance had some some ones that were pretty interesting, like deal increased damage. Now obviously I have no idea how good Blood Lance is, but they do have interesting legendaries at least, so I do like that. When it comes to uniques, the only thing I can say about uniques is, well actually I don't know if this is really a unique problem, because I think this is what it's supposed to be like, is I actually kind of like how impactful they are to your build. A lot of people don't like that there's builds that you can only do if you have Tempest Roar, right? But at the same time, isn't that kind of the point of a unique item? It's supposed to be game changing, because like some of the issues with uniques, like for example, running Temerity, Mad Wolf's Glee, Insatiable Fury on the Druid is actually like, they're actually not good enough, right? Like in my opinion, those are not good enough to run, and it's because you lose all these secondary stats. So it's like, they need to actually buff those uniques, right? But Tempest Roar on the other hand is just absolute game changer. Right, so Vasili's Prayer, again, another absolute game changer in terms of like build. Like there are builds that you just can't do unless you have these items, and I think that that's fine, because I think it's a unique item. It's supposed to be hard to get. It's supposed to be a reward for the players that are putting in time and playing the game diligently. You know, I don't think people should be able to play the best builds if they don't have to work for them. I mean, this is kind of a grind game. If you're not having to grind, it's like, you know, it's not really rewarding if you're not having to do anything to get the gear, I guess, if that makes sense. So I guess I'll leave the video with my main gripes, because I feel like I've been overall pretty positive about everything I've said so far. I think the main gripe I have with the game is the server issues and whatnot. I think that's just unacceptable. I think for $100, the amount of lag, the amount of DCs, the way they handle patches is just completely wrong. It's like, why would, it's like they want to patch things, right? And they said that they were trying to patch it so it would have minimal effect on the players. Well, you could have a minimal effect on the players by just saying, hey, we're just going to bring the game down for 3 hours, you know, like they do for World of Warcraft, and just do the patch, right? Like, that's it. That's all they have to do. They don't have to do anything else other than that. Just bring it down, patch it, and then, because I don't want to have to wake up, be like, oh, I'm gonna go play Diablo, have my whole, like, you have your whole day around playing this game, right? Where you're just gonna go grind, and then turns out you're just DCing nonstop because they decided to do a patch. I think that's just like, why? Like that, it would be better if people just know in advance, hey, the game is going down on this time. You're not going to be able to play, so then at least people are not getting wrecked when they think they're going to go home and spend a night of Diablo, and then, well, nope, actually it's a night of just frustration and DCing. That's my main gripe. But anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on the game. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.